that was made available through the IDEA Network for Biomedical Research and Excellence of Alaska, also known as INBRE, and that's run out of UAF, but available at all three campuses, all three universities. So they made available this, a screening of this film called Picture a Scientist. And Picture a Scientist is a film about some of the challenges faced by minority members of the group. So it follows, or it focuses on female scientists in US academia, but embodies issues common in industry and academic institutions around the world. So the directors of the film, Shannon, Shattuck, and Ian Cheney, employ personal histories and statistical data to present the issue and point out the need for institutional change. As described in Variety magazine, instances of explicit harassment, explicit gender and racial bias, and entrenched institutional discrimination have led several scientific luminaries to advocate for new perspectives on how to make STEM fields more diverse, equitable, and open to all. So after all, as stated in the film, Picture a Scientist, excluding women excludes 50% of potential experts. So the viewing of Picture a Scientist, as I mentioned, was made possible through funding from Alaska INBRE. And if you haven't already, you can watch the film through a link and password posted on the Power and Privilege schedule description of this panel discussion. And that link will be available until Thursday at noon, so another couple of days. We were provided with a 72-hour window. But that brings me to today's panel. So to discuss the film's implications and share insights on the experience of women scientists, we're joined today by UAF Professor of Fisheries Shannon Atkinson and UAS Assistant Professor of Geology Sonia Nagorski. We had planned that UAS Title IX Coordinator Romy McAdams would join us, but due to unavoidable circumstances, she had to cancel. So UAS Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Management and former Title IX Coordinator Lori Klein has agreed to join the panel to share her insights on efforts to address issues of sexual harassment and gender bias across the UA system. Let's see, UAS Professor of Mathematics Brian Blitz has agreed to help us field questions and comments. So as I mentioned, this is a discussion. Hopefully plenty of people have watched the film, and we're hoping that you have questions and comments. And to express those questions or comments, you can either raise your hand or enter a request to speak in the chat box, and I will acknowledge you. At that point, our technical expert extraordinaire, Gloria Mary, will unmute your microphone. If you aren't recognized, please don't give up. Okay, I'll keep looking, we'll get it done. Okay, so for those who prefer.
They can actually unmute themselves. They don't have to wait for me to do it.
Oh heck, look at that. Nobody has an excuse, okay? So let's see. I lost my space now here. Okay, let's see. For those of you who, let me see. For those of you who prefer to enter questions and comments in the chat box, I'm happy to present those. Brian can help me. To get started though, I'd like to provide panel members the opportunity to share their thoughts on what they thought were the more salient issues discussed in the film Picture a Scientist. So how if we start alphabetically? Let's start with Dr. Atkinson. Shannon?
Hi, thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you for hosting this. I really appreciate the opportunity to bring all of these issues to light. This whole workshop couple of days is just a fabulous expose of all of the human characteristics that we're all exposed to on a daily basis. And yet it's hard to always understand how much they can impact people, their lives, and their careers. And from that perspective, I'm speaking as a woman. I grew up in a biracial household. And one of the best things that I think my father taught me was to be tough and don't expect a lot from people, because women of color rarely succeed in this world. And in order for you to be successful, you have to have a fairly thick skin. So I developed it early, and it certainly is a good thing that I did. But I thought it was a very well done film, and somewhat sad to me. On the other hand, it's real. And so I'm happy to entertain questions. I hope that the audience will ask all three of us questions, and I guess I pass it off to Lori is next alphabetically.
Dr. Atkinson and Lisa, thank you for hosting today. Appreciate it. I'm happy to be here with you today, and really sort of with my former experience as Title IX coordinator for the University of Alaska Southeast, and a woman not in science, but in leadership roles, various leadership roles in education. I just had a chance to watch the film earlier today. And I'm still not even quite done, but I want to echo Dr. Atkinson's comments that it's a really well done film. I would encourage everyone to take the time to watch it. It covers a lot of ground and time, the time frame. We meet with scientists who really got her early career several decades ago, and to current women in science and the experience that they're having. And so I just found, I saw advances in how we address sexual harassment and gender discrimination over time, but there's a lot of common threads as well. And so I would really encourage folks to watch it if they haven't seen it already. And I'm tossing it to Dr. Nagorski.
Hello, and thanks too for inviting me to this panel, Lisa. And I'm glad to be joined by all of you. So I'm an assistant professor of geology here at UAS, and I have been a scientist, I guess you could say, since I switched to a science major in college many years ago. But I came from a background of a family not in the sciences, and I'm from a very traditional kind of a family where my mother and the women didn't have a powerful role in terms of their careers. And so it was that part was very new to me growing up. And then I mostly grew up overseas where due to my father's work, and my travel in much of the world gave me some experience of kind of being sort of an outsider, or being the one who didn't quite fit into the norms of the group, whatever it was, culturally or socially. And so I think that even though I didn't have the role models for a female scientist, I think my experience in being on the outskirts of the norms that way helped give me some strength to believe in myself to go into science. Yet along the way, I have definitely encountered many of the themes in this movie about whether it's being passed up or marginalized in different ways as a scientist, as a woman, and have luckily myself have never had the more, sort of more super aggressive, violent kinds of things happen within my scientific experience. But that quote really, one of the quotes from the movie that really got to me was that a ton of feathers still weighs a ton, and that was one that really struck me. I thought this movie was excellent. It brings up a lot of really important points. It really brings to light how some of these everyday implicit biases can really pile up, and how much time they take too, outside of just trying to work on your career, trying to also take care of your family, take care of yourself in your life, and then to also deal with the biases out there is really takes away from our ability to be as successful as we can be in terms of promoting and or just carrying through our scientific research. And I'm happy to speak to that more with questions as questions come up. And let's see, I think that leaves Brian Blitz somehow. BB, you got passed up there alphabetically.
Well, I'm not really on the panel. I'm just helping out.
Okay. Am I missing anyone then, Lisa? But Brian, you should still, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Brian Blitz and I teach math, and I definitely have a gray beard and am a white male and was very privileged growing up. I grew up back east in a pretty rich community. And so I was pretty horrified by that movie and some of the things that occurred in it. And maybe I didn't have any experiences like that in my two graduate institutions. One of them was Northern Arizona University and one of them was Washington State University. And I would say half the student population in the math programs were female. And I had the impression, and maybe this is just the white male talking, but I had the impression that everything was great there and we all liked each other and worked together and it was all, you know, fun and games. But maybe my perception was a little off. But I think that's all I'll say for now.
Well, as the moderator, I'm gonna, this is such a weird format. Usually you could look out and somebody would raise their hand or something, but I can only see a certain number of people at a certain time. So I'll try to kind of provide little interims so that if anybody wants to speak up, they want to ask a question or make a comment, you're welcome while I'm rambling a bit. But so there's your chance. Okay, barring none,
I have a question.
Oh, cool. Go, JoMarie.
This is JoMarie Alba. So I asked this question at a previous conference a couple of years ago at WSN, and you know the whole entire was for undergraduates or graduate students, like it seems like it's hard for us to navigate the system and finding out who exactly are our allies or who are going to be the PIs that are really going to hold us up and not necessarily view us as cheap labor. So my question is, like, what do you think are ways for, like, how can academia or the university, like, what can we do to make it easier for undergraduates and graduate students to find the professors who are going to be helpful for us as we navigate this journey? Because you know, for myself and talking to other graduate students, a lot of them have horror stories, and I've been lucky enough to not have that. And I think that comes along, and I think the reason that is because I had people who taught me to ask the right questions. But that's only available if you find those opportunities. And I'm kind of wondering, is like, well, how can we as an institution make this available for everybody? What are your thoughts on that?
Lisa, I'm happy to have a go at that. Hi, JoMarie. It's been a long time since I've seen you, but it's nice to see you still in the field. And JoMarie once essentially volunteered in a class that I was teaching to get some experience working with younger students. And because she liked the field of marine mammalogy and the class that I was teaching happened to be teaching people to re-articulate the skeletons of marine mammals. So it was a very fun class, and it gave students an opportunity. You know, I think the question you're posing is really quite a difficult one, because we deal with a bureaucracy. And even though the University of Alaska on the whole has been a fabulous employer for me, I recognize that within every bureaucracy, there are sort of way stations and gatekeepers that hold the key to whether you can be successful in any endeavor that you're trying to undertake. One of the challenges that I have as a professor is that I can't provide opportunities for everyone who wants them in my lab. I can tell you right now that I have at least 10, maybe 15 emails of students who would like to come and work in my lab. And I know that I can't provide opportunities for all of them. I believe it would enhance the University of Alaska system if they would help us make those opportunities available to all of them. Because as I look through many of the CVs and resumes of students that send things to me, I see that there are some fabulous people out there, and they come with different perspectives, they come with different experiences. And so, you know, I will say one of the best parts of my job is that I get to work with young, smart people who have a drive to give back to the community and to succeed in some form of life. And, you know, my definition of success has nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with happiness. And while I agree you need money and nobody can live without it, on the other hand, it's still very important for people to find something that they're passionate about. So I'm not sure that as a system, there is a blanket way that we can provide opportunities for everyone. But what I can say, and what I do say to a lot of young people that I talk to, is that call around, talk to people, find people that are supportive, find people that you like their personality, you like the things that they do. And, you know, gain, even if it's just a half hour of mentorship from them, gain from that so that it will help you make your decisions as to which direction you should or shouldn't be pursuing. And I know it's not a great answer, but I do know that the people that, you know, try to make an appointment to talk to me and that sort of thing, I do try to at least give them that much that helps inspire them about what is out there and give some hope that they can find the right place for them to be. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Would you like to add anything, Sonia? Lori?
Oh, I just think that the role of us as mentors for our students, whether it's you know, advisors, in fact, even if you don't have students in our classes who are interested in getting to know you as a scientist and getting to know what we do, and you know, I think we can help inspire people by having the time, yes, to talk to them. And you know, I find I do so much of my kind of in-depth talking with students that ends up having, I think, an impact on their directions or their decisions and what they want to do with their lives, or the feedback they've given me after they're done is that, oh, I just remember, you know, driving with you on a field trip and having that conversation about what to do next, and the roadblocks that I faced and how I dealt with those really end up having a big impact on students, some even more than, so outside the classroom. And I think that when we do things like field work or lab work together, or when students can do internships with female scientists or scientists who are, you know, somehow, I'm talking about for women, female students who can find those role models and that inspiration. I think that one-on-one time is really valuable. So as a university, what can we do? Well, I think we need to make sure that faculty are getting credit for their advising and that extra time that they spend with students outside the classroom, whether it's, you know, and I don't know how to quantify that necessarily, but whether it's our office hours or, you know, going the extra mile to take time to talk to students out, you know, well, not inside and outside the classroom, both. But I think that is, and you know, sort of on a more technical level, sometimes on our workloads, are we getting enough credit for the amount of advising that we do of students? Because I think that we get very little credit for that. So getting back to the question of what can the institution do to help promote, I think this was the question, like that, fostering that kind of mentorship. I think that's where we can ask for more credit. Because I spend a lot of time on that myself.
JoMarie, I really appreciate your question. And there's a lot of students I think on this session, and I wonder if there's a particular line of questioning or a set of questions. You said you've been taught to ask good questions, and the questions that maybe get you the information you need quickly in order to assess the landscape. I hope you don't mind if I throw a question back at you, but what is it, maybe some advice that you could share from your experiences?
Oh, sure. So the first thing, I guess, was, you know, a lot of this came from an internship that I had at Scripps. And we were, through our mentorship, we were paired with graduate students who were underrepresented in academia. And my mentor, he said, step one, recognize your worth as a student, that it's a two-way thing, where it's a two-way relationship where, yes, you are asking to work in a lab or to have someone be a mentor, but they're also looking to find a person to, you know, for lack of a better term, make them look good, because you are doing all this work and their name gets to be tagged onto it. So there's really, really recognizing that, even though at the very beginning, you have like a lot of imposter syndrome, and that's very normal, that, you know, you're a lot more valuable, and to really like hold that in your heart. And you're like, I'm putting a lot of work in, so heck yeah, I deserve a say in this. And then also the biggest thing is, like, the biggest question that I always tend to ask when I meet with potential professors, I made it imperative that, like, you have to make the time to talk to me before I choose to work with you. And that cannot just be with an email. It has to be like, we meet face to face, or we have a phone call or Zoom call or whatever. And the question I always asked them was, you know, if I talk to your previous students or people that you've worked with in the past, what is the worst thing they're going to say about you? Like, blatantly, like, I want to know. Like, and if they know what the worst thing is about them, great. If they don't know, red flag. And then I also made it imperative to have them give me a list of their previous students. And it would also be like, so I would contact all these students, and this is a lot of work, but I contacted all these students and said, hey, I have these questions. I want to know these questions. And they're like, not necessarily questions of, it was more questions of like, who is this person as a mentor? And do they actually care about you and your mental health as a person? Will they hold you up at the end, type of thing? And what is the worst thing about them? Or what's the greatest thing about them? And so I put in a lot of work in contacting previous students and seeing what those previous students were up to. And basically I gauged it as, if students quickly answered my questions, that was a good sign. And if I never heard from any of those students, that was a bad sign. So those were the things, where recognizing your worth, get the professor to meet with you and to talk to them and ask them what their worst trait is and what even their greatest trait is. It's really easy for people to talk themselves up, but nobody wants to talk about their worst traits. And then getting in contact with the students and seeing if it meshes. Is it true? Is the worst thing the same? Or do the students have greater things to say, or do they have worse things to say? Those were the questions. That's what I learned in the process of finding people to work with.
So I'd like to turn my seat on the panel over to JoMarie.
Yes,
So can I make a comment back to JoMarie? Because I think those are excellent things. And one of the things that I believe students need to understand is that you're not just learning from a professor. You are learning from a whole system. And so in my case, I've always had multiple graduate students that work with me at the same time. And I like it because we have almost like a tiered mentoring system, where the more senior students mentor the more junior students, the more junior students mentor the undergraduates. And so by putting in sort of a system where that mentoring is in place, but it's kind of tiered, someone coming into my lab is not just gaining from me. They're gaining from the whole lab as a whole, with these a lot of different students who have a lot of different experiences to share. So, you know, in some ways that not only takes the pressure off of me to be the only person in the great white coat, but to be, you know, someone who's helping to lead a whole group and a whole culture. And from that perspective, I have loved having multiple graduate students. I find it a little lonely from my perspective, but I'm a gregarious person, but I find it a little lonely to just have, you know, one graduate student, because I sort of feel for them. I think in the collective sense, there's a lot more learning that can take place.
I would like to add one more thing that I forgot. The final thing too is that once you get to the place, is finding that community within the people who are like you, exactly like you, and who are feeling the same things like you. Finding that space where you can be incandescently your true self, without it like, and it being okay. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like within like the science department. Like I know Colleen's in here right now, and like when I was at UAS, I went to the Wuchin club meetings, and that was just like a wonderful break. And going to the Native Student Resource Center, I believe is the name, like, and going there, and that was just two different worlds. Like I could be at the Anderson building and be my science self, but then like I would go to and see Colleen and everybody there, and then like be JoMarie, the loud, obnoxious Filipino woman who doesn't know how to navigate academia self. So, and it's finding that too, finding that community, and it can be anywhere. It's just being brave enough to look for it.
So you, I was trying to think of how to word this. So I would like to have bring this into a discussion about diversity in science. And I could ask the obvious question, why do you think diversity in science is important? But I think I'd like to start with JoMarie. How do you think you could increase diversity in science? What are some things that you feel institutionally could be done to engender, for lack of a better phrase, diversity in the STEM fields?
I think everybody needs to take the implicit association test
Oh,
they showed in the movie.
oh.
Like I think Harvard has like, go to this website, see how sexist, racist, whatever is you think you are or are not, and then discover how much you are.
The first step, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of how to make it more diverse, I guess it's really representation, and getting and giving the people who are, this is a hard question to answer. I honestly don't know, but in my head, I just think, if growing up, I never was told I could be a scientist. But if I saw a female scientist of color, that would have just been, and met her in Ketchikan, that would have been like the biggest deal to me. And so I think it would be, it's really important for people to put in an effort and to reach out to different communities and say like, hey, you can do this too. Like, it's totally possible. And to associate that, like, you know, every observation that you make is actually can be a scientific observation. And just sometimes all it really takes is just for someone to say, you can do it. Like, I'm here, I'm doing it. You can do it too. So that, I think, like, that's more on a personal level, but as a, like, how can the university or academia do it? I'm not 100% sure. Maybe give us more funding so we can go to go to different communities throughout the state and be a bigger presence and get people from those communities to be part of like our research teams.
Lori, would you like to take a stab at that?
You know, one of my favorite quotes that came back to me this morning at the opening keynote, and it came back to me this afternoon at the opening keynote, is wider ranges of normal make the world a better place for everyone. And so when I think about a wider range of women in science, more women in science that can be seen, this can be seen as a normal thing, and young women coming up and being interested in science see it as a normal thing, we start to change the culture. We start to change our thinking and our engagement and our acceptance, and you know, some of the things that that kind of surrounds sexual and gender discrimination in lots of fields, science being one of them, but in lots of fields, start disappearing because it is not normal to behave that way. Because there's greater balance in the field, there's greater acceptance and understanding of what is unacceptable as well. And so I think that I want to echo JoMarie's comments about the implicit. I just pulled up the Harvard site. I'll dump it in the chat, but the Project Implicit out of Harvard, a really great book that speaks to this is called Blind Spot, and it talks to you about the test, and it talks to you about taking the test, and it helps you to understand things that you associate very quickly that you don't even consciously think about. And I just think it's a really remarkable intersection with this conversation, particularly with women in science.
Sonia? Oh.
So the question being, how do we make it more diverse?
Yeah.
We make the sciences more diverse.
It started with why is diversity important?
Oh, why is diversity
But
important?
then how, you know, practically, how do you do that institutionally?
Yeah. Well, and I noticed from the participant list, we have several, maybe many other female scientists in here. And so I invite other people to please chime in as well. So, why diversity is important? Well, as this documentary spoke to as well, because we have so much potential where we're only tapping into a small part of our population to not be looking for the expertise of, I know, women and then marginalized people, men and women from different cultures, backgrounds, race. And so by not including them, we're only seeing a small part of our potential as a society to, you know, work on different kinds of medicine and to solve problems in the world, you know, on many different fields of science and math. And I think other fields as well, but I think it's, as shown, it's particularly strong in the sciences. And so how to make it more diverse, I think that's a really complicated answer. There's no one easy answer to that. I think it starts from the time that, you know, just all the cultural information that we get as kids from TV and the internet and all that, and that really shapes people's implicit biases. And then moving forward, I think that as while there's so much that was indeed sad about this, about the depictions in this film, I actually think maybe, I hope, but I also think that we are progressing, at least in academia, where generally people tend to be a little more open-minded and more, maybe more than other fields of the workforce, to think a little more progressively. And I think there's a long ways to go, but I think that, of course, having a diverse group of students and then having a diverse set of faculty who can serve as role models. I know for sure about the importance of role models had to me. I didn't even understand it really when it was happening, but I had one female geology professor in undergraduate, the only female science teacher or professor that I ever had. And I actually found her very intimidating, and she was very difficult to get a good grade from and everything. But anyway, she had this enormous, looking back on it now, and I've written to her now to tell her the impact she had on my life. I think over time, I've come to appreciate the sort of subdued power of a role model. And so having more representation on the faculty is really important, but but then there's also just the problem that if we don't have as many women completing their masters or completing their PhDs, that leaky pipeline of how you have 50% women in the sciences in college, and by the time you get to a postdoc and applying for faculty positions, it's a small minority. So then how do you achieve that kind of equity on the faculty line? There's a lot of cultural and societal and other problems along the way. So it's a very complex problem that has to be addressed on many fronts. But I think the awareness, the issue, like we wouldn't have this panel probably even 20, 30 years ago when a lot of the issues in that film were happening. So I'm not denying that it doesn't happen anymore. I'm sure it does. But I think that with awareness, I think those kinds of things would be called out sooner and maybe not happen as much, maybe as an older generation makes way for more progressive people in academia. That would help alleviate that issue too. Anyway, if anybody else wants to chime in there, I don't. Yeah.
Well, I'll go ahead and chime in, Lisa, and that is that, Sonia, I agree with you completely. And those other things that happen along the way, whether they are cultural or they are by choice, not all of them are problems. A lot of them are chosen. I chose to have 2 children, and it's been one of the best parts of my life. I'm choosing to help care for my 95-year-old mother who's sitting right next to me here. And, these are choices that you make in life because you want to, because they are a part of who we are. And I'm okay with my students knowing all of those things. I'm okay with my students, realizing that, yes, my life is diverse, but it's also complicated at times. And that's just part of it and the way you have to go forward. So, some of them are our choices, but I'm proud of all of mine.
I agree, and I made the same choice. I, was working part-time and scaled back a lot of my work in order to have time for my family. And I know there has to be some way of maybe being able to take that into the big picture instead of just counting the number of publications and counting this, right? And because women more than men tend to make those kind of choices, it's yeah, I agree. It is a choice. It's not like a bad thing if you don't, or that I'm not blaming the world for the fact that I'm, sort of 15 years behind on getting my, tenure packet together compared to someone else who graduated from graduate school with me. So those were, yeah, I'm not going to immediately just blame the culture or something like that. But I think that having sort of a fuller picture of the diversity or of what it's like to take a career path, that it's not only that within 10 years you should be here and in the next 5 years here and there, and right, sort of fuller picture assessment of people. It's hard to find as a one size fits all way of trying to, yeah, assess a scientist for their success.
And that one size, more than likely you're going to find, is not cast on a female like any of the three that are on this panel. And Brian, I totally appreciated the way you introduced yourself, that you were the white male, that you'd had the big gray beard, and that you were the guy of privilege. You know, it's not, don't ever get me wrong that, you know, all white men are bad. There's no way that is wrong. There's no way that is right. It's just that the model or the image will more likely be cast around the Brians of the world than they will be cast around the Sonias or the Shannons of the world. And so knowing that, we have to encourage our bureaucracies to be flexible and to be a little bit more accepting of people who come with a different outlook on life. And what I've found, and I've had lots of graduate students, I've had 38 graduate students that I have either successfully graduated, or I have 5 more to go right here, right now. And what I find is that I think part of the reason that they are attracted to my lab is that there is a diversity there, and that it's okay, we're okay with it. We're positive about that diversity. And the system isn't completely built for us, but we make it work. And yeah, we run into brick walls, and you have to do a little bit of head banging, and you know, it gets sore after a while, but it's okay. You can still go forward and still keep a good attitude about it.
There were two points that came out of the conversation that I thought were relevant and that could be addressed. Childcare would certainly be one thing that would make the playing field a little bit more even for professional women. Not for me, wasn't my thing, but I totally empathize, you know, with ladies with women that did choose to do that, because that's got to be incredibly challenging, trying to get your work done and still raise a family. And now I think you're being teachers too, right? Yeah. So, wow. So institutionalized, well, I hate to use that word, that scares people, but workplace childcare, subsidized childcare, I think that's what I'm looking for. And then the standards that identify a successful professional. You're right, they've all been defined on by the past 200 years of white males, nothing personal, Brian. But, you know, you mentioned earlier, Shannon, that money, you know, your paycheck isn't the thing that drives, it's not your primary driver. That's however, seems to be how a lot of people define their success. So reassessing those success criteria, but boy, that's a big cultural change too. That's a big cultural change. Oh, Brian, you have a question? Oh, it's Megan.
Hi.
Hi, Megan.
Yeah, I had a question about that, maybe from the panelists. What, you know, if you want your drive to be like your choices, what, you know, what makes you tick or whatever, if a woman or somebody chooses a path that's divergent from the traditional path, I think the question is like, what's the trust factor of could they then come back to this scientific career, or, you know, and I think that's one of the things that sort of gets you in that road of like, oh, got to do this, got to go to grad school, got to go to postdoc, got to do this thing. Because if you don't do it then, you know, you might just totally derail yourself. So I'm just curious what you guys think, if that's a realistic option, or how do we make it realistic maybe?
Yeah, I think that's a really big problem. I know many friends, women who yeah, who dropped off along the way because they thought that once they were out for 3 to 5 years, there was no going back in. I think I hear that a lot, and it's definitely a worry of mine, which is why I kind of maintain some part-time work. And, you know, and I had to, and then along the way, when you have all those self-doubts and you feel like the world is just moving ahead and you can't jump back in. And then if also along the way, you're getting messages directly or indirectly about your, you know, just that you're basically inferior anyway. And I think that is, you know, I think a lot of women could speak to that from personal experience, myself included. That makes it even more of a battle to think that you can overcome this, you know, sort of like you're dropping out of the game for a while and then you want to jump back in when you've already been, you know, put down or passed over or whatever from in the past. It's really hard to kind of get up that gumption to encourage to go for it and to not just reassess. Oops, dogs.
Megan, I think it's a really good question. And I think my advice would be find your support network. A support network is so important all the way through life, whether you're at, you know, the student phase, trying to figure out what you're going to do, what interests you, where you're going to go, whether you're in the junior professional phase, or even when you're mid-career. One of the biggest lackings, I think, that we have are mentorships for mid and senior women. There are almost none out there. Everybody thinks you know how to do it, and you don't. So having that support network is really, really important. For me, my career was anything but normal. I did not do the assistant associate full professor. It didn't work for me. At the time that I had my kids, I didn't want to work full time. I wasn't looking for a tenure track position. I wanted to do both. And so the way that I thought doing both might work the best for me was to kind of do each one half time. But like you say, if you're not careful, going that route can inadvertently have you drop out of the system such that it is difficult to get back. And so one of the things that I kept as my priority was making sure that I published, such that if you look at my CV, you can't really tell what years I had my kids. Because, you know, I made sure that, you know, when I was pregnant or staying home or whatever, I was focusing on getting papers submitted. I was focusing on making sure that I could be spending time editing and doing things like that when I was home taking care of a baby. And so those kinds of things help you. The other thing with the support network, I am so fortunate, and I'm not just saying it because my mom's sitting next to me, but to have a fabulous mother who helped me when I was pregnant with my second child, and I got offered a part-time teaching contract for the spring semester. Well, the baby was due in October. It was like, oh, I don't think I can do that. You know, this doesn't fit. And I'll tell you right now, having a baby never fits, but you can help make it fit with that support network. And so what my mom did for me was she said, I'll take the baby 2 mornings a week and you can go teach that class, make your office hours right after your class. And then that's your little window when you focus heavily on your career part, you know your child's being taken care of, and then, you know, you get to switch back right after. So there are ways to do it, but I think you kind of have to be a planner, and that helps a lot.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
Yvonne Gordon, did you have a question?
No, I was just applauding
Oh, cool.
Shannon's comments. Thank you. I'm all right for right now. We are reaching the end of the session time here. So if anybody has any last questions, now would be a great time to ask them.
Yes, that is true. We're coming towards the end. Anybody? I think this is like This is a fascinating conversation. I certainly have more questions, but I'll just have to corner Shannon, Sonia, or Lori sometime and ask them then. You too, Brian. I'll ask you too. Remember, the film is available until Thursday at noon. So I hope you'll take the time to watch it. It really is meaningful. And continue the conversation. And I hope we can all work towards a more equitable, diverse, not only in STEM fields, but in all across the university, all across our culture. Looks like we're making a little progress. So I'd like to thank everyone. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Brian, and everyone and JoMarie. Thanks for all your great questions.
Hey, Lisa, there's a question in the chat about where could they watch the video again?
Oh, if you go to the Power and Privilege schedule, I think it was posted in the chat. Yes, it was. If you go back, I think it was the second.
And Lori just posted it again. Thanks, Lori.
Oh, right. And if you go to the schedule for the Power and Privilege Symposium, in the description of this event, the link is there with the password. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. If you didn't watch the film, you should go see it. And I like that this conversation was had some focus on solutions, and that camaraderie among women is really important, but then also the need for everybody, not just women, to be aware of the issue and to work on their biases.
Yeah, JoMarie, your conversation about role models and seeing diversity in front of you made me realize when I was a graduate student trying to get through the chemistry seminar every week, I just now realize it's like, oh yeah, that exposed me to a lot of women chemists. That was a good thing. So maybe we need a seminar series in chemistry or biology or geology.
Well, and as Rosemary just said, that the experiences we discussed are across most professions. So for sure, this is not just a science thing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, that's 6 minutes to spare.